Hello, once again, and welcome to The Loadout, presented by The Daily Dot. See all that? Capital T, capital D, capital D. I'm your host, as I always am, Jared Wynn, bringing you one more night of esports news discussion, debate, and diatribes. And I am joined today by my good friend, the one and the only, irrepressible, Sir Richard Lewis. Richard, you returned from your great American road trip looking as svelte as ever. Are you feeling good?
As I was just saying off camera, I'm feeling a bit too good. The food in America is as billed, we really had a lot of excesses out there. And I was going to so many dinners, talking to so many people, trying to get this union up and running. That basically it just meant that I was permanently eating ridiculously good food, and that was the last thing a man of my frame needed anyway. So. Yeah, I need to go on a crash diet, basically. There's no two ways about it. So that's not good. No.
To our loyal viewers that I saw Richard Lewis here in person, and I thought he looked fine and healthy, and I saw no problems there. He looked like the only Richard Lewis he should ever be, and that is why we have him back on the show, because only Richard Lewis can be Richard Lewis. Now, speaking of your time in America, there's some big news coming out of America. In fact, an American media company, you may have heard about this, Richard, because you actually wrote about it and broke the story yourself. There had been some rumblings going on for a while we were all aware of. Turner bringing on a Counter-Strike league to their cable network. I think TBS is where it will start. That will all still evolve, I'm sure, as the 2016 approaches us and we get towards the actual league. I think the terms set out thus far are 2 seasons of 10 weeks each.
Yes.
That will, in theory, not conflict with major competitions elsewhere in the Counter-Strike world. Now, we'll see how that actually works out. Teams, I believe, invited to take part in the competition. So let's just lay out the basics as we know them. And again, with the caveat that it's 2015 and this won't begin until next year, so I'm sure things could change. But the basics as we know them, and then we'll get into discussing the good, the bad, and the ugly here.
Yeah. I had the pleasure to be in the meeting when it was all being discussed. I was invited there kind of in an advisory capacity. I was just sort of there being Richard Lewis. I was very sort of honored and privileged to be in the room at the time. And, I did sort of witness, how it was going down. And certainly everything that I saw while I was in that room was more than encouraging. So, for example, the word exclusivity never came up once at all. And I think that was really important. Sure, there is the downside if you're running an alternative event and there's 10 weeks of programming that's likely to be broadcast on a Friday night and those teams need to be in the studio. But one thing I will say is it's not that Valve aren't aware of this. Valve obviously have to give their blessing, and Valve want there to be a very balanced landscape. The majors still need to be involved in this landscape. And with all of that said, I think Turner are more than aware that they've got to be very careful. We have a fragile ecosystem, and they're looking to respect that. So, that was the first thing that was super encouraging. The other thing that was super encouraging was that when I asked the guys at Turner, because me, I'm very forward. I didn't really care too much. I didn't have a dog in the fight. Basically, obviously, all the team owners that were there, they want their teams to be invited to the league. I don't have a stake in it really. So I was very forthright and I asked them, why do you want to get into esports now? Of all times, why now? And I was expecting some corporate sales bullshit. And instead they were very honest and they said it's relevancy. The demographic that are interested in esports is a demographic we want to court, and we think that it can be a marriage made in heaven. If you look at our sports broadcasting, plus if you look at the broadcasting we have on TBS, which is where it'll air to begin with. It's all like things like American Dad and Conan and all of these other shows that people are gonna enjoy watching. So it definitely it could be a marriage made in heaven, and they didn't strike me as being disingenuous. They seemed to be really respectful and reverential. In fact, it was WME and IMG, the esports talent agency, that really kind of brought so much of the sort of esports people together. You know, it wasn't like Turner was sticking their fingers in. They sort of deferred to their wisdom and experience in this particular field. So all the signs that I saw there were really, really encouraging. I saw a lot of people saying that this is going to be like CGS 2.0. As someone who worked for CGS 1.0, I can tell you the impression I got was completely different. It was like day and night.
Yeah, you mentioned the youth demographic play from
Mm.
Turner, and that makes sense to me. I actually spoke to ESPN during X Games about their involvement in esports, and they had the same thing to say. They wanted to get involved with youth demographic. I think it's become pretty clear now. If you want that younger demographic, the new generation, if you will, of sports fans, really, you have to go to competitive gaming, or you should at least, if you have some good business sense. So we have Turner coming in. You mentioned CGS, the comparison there. We both had some. I had much lighter involvement than I think you did with CGS, but I was also involved on a very small level briefly with them, and we both know what that was like. It was a very difficult
Yes.
time for the industry as a whole. It nearly crushed. Well, it popped a bubble that existed at the time. Now, I will say the industry was very different then. You were able to encapsulate pretty much the entire esports industry in this one competition because it was a much smaller industry than it is today. You would have a hard time putting all of esports in one bubble like that in one new CGS. So I don't think the comparison is quite equivocal, but I understand the concerns of putting the competitive gaming platform onto a broadcast service that is old school and with people in charge of it who are not necessarily nuanced in the ways of esports. Your belief is that they are handing off the decision making to people who are better versed in that. Is that the big difference here?
Well, I mean, look, as I said, it's a partnership, and I certainly don't want to give the impression that I'm speaking for on behalf of anybody because simply wouldn't be the case. As I said, I was a guest in the meeting, and all I can really do is provide my own observations. But what I will say is that Turner were really good in sort of letting WME IMG, who obviously have that esports expertise, kind of head up sections of the meetings. I believe it was that group that sort of had a big say in terms of who was in the room. I'm pretty sure the only reason I was in the room was because they thought there might be some benefits that can come from that. So it definitely seems like Turner really are being respectful, and this is another thing. CGS, when they came in, they said, "Look, we're TV. We know what works on TV.
Right.
We know what's best for you," and that's why we ended up with MR9 as a format and third person
Oh
Counter
God!
Strike, which of course is an absolute anathema.
Don't trigger me,
And
Richard,
people
please.
yeah, I'm trying not to trigger you, but I mean, people forget, right? Like the reason that happened was because the executive that wanted to broadcast Counter-Strike, and they always knew it was going to be problematic, which is why we ended up with teams wearing basketball jerseys, and you couldn't use the word terrorist or bomb. Uh, he showed it to a focus group, which was comprised of his wife and said, "Which one do you think makes more sense?" And she knew nothing about gaming. She hadn't followed gaming at all, and she said that one, the third person one, and that's literally why we ended up with third person broadcast for Counter Strike, which of course is horrific. And if you remember, they didn't even show all the games. They only showed the opening rounds, then they would cut to a break and come back and show the vitally important rounds in some of the broadcasts. So it was really, really awful. Now, Turner have said that the one thing they can definitely do, and this is evidenced by their sports programming, is they can bring a new level of sheen to the broadcast experience. The one thing they're very good at, as anyone who's watched any sports broadcasting on TurnerSports can attest to, is they're very good at the ancillary programming that comes with sports. They can help build stories, build narratives. They do player profiles. They used to do this in the NBA. They used to do this in I believe it was the WCW wrestling. They currently do this with the NCAA Men's Basketball League, the collegiate athletes. They currently do this with NASCAR. They currently do this with Major League Baseball. To be able to have that kind of programming around esports for me is really, really exciting. I'm not talking about a 5-minute cheesy video about how gaming changed my life. I'm talking about 30-minute documentaries that go in depth about a player's history. I'm talking about maybe even reality shows. I'm talking about backstage access. I'm talking about in-depth player histories and player profiles, all made for television. And of course, it's not TV exclusive. There was a lot of talk about how they can sort of broadcast online and engage with the digital appreciative audience as well. So I'm actually excited. As somebody that's usually cynical, this is the first time I've really seen something where I thought, okay, the corporate guys get esports, and the most important thing to get is that you don't know everything about esports yet, and they're really willing to learn. I've had some meetings with them since, and they're full of questions, and they're the right kind of questions. So again, I do stress to anybody that in terms of what it's going to mean for CS:GO, I wouldn't be worried. I think this is going to be a very good thing. They're not going to censor anything or sanitize anything. They're not looking to change a format of how the game is played. And on top of that, it's got to be said, this is an esports league. CS:GO is the start. I think they'll look to get other games on board at a later date.
Yeah, I wanted to get to that in a second, but to follow up on what you said, it is an important difference here because we have with CGS people in the production unit who were experienced in Major League Baseball broadcast and NBA basketball broadcast. We had that, but I think it was more an attitude of, okay, we've been in the big leagues, so we're going to show you how it's done. This is what we're going to bring to the table, and we're going to conform your game to our standards, as opposed to saying, okay, we're used to this level of production quality from MLB baseball, from NBA basketball. We can bring that production quality to your existing product and make it look better, make it sound, feel better.
Yep.
Changing things that way. Also, the difference between, like you mentioned, like a player profile, a thorough documentary on a player, as opposed to you don't believe what this kid does for a living. He plays video games. Let me tell you about it. That kind of approach to it. It is a very different thing. It is a little bit, again, as someone who was actually there for the CGS debacle, I would call it. It is a little bit wait and see, and it's hard to just throw myself out there and be like, hey, bring it on. But it is, it's inevitable. This kind of thing is going to happen again. So you hope that when it does happen, the right people are there and they handle it the right way. And it sounds to me, I mentioned this when I talked about it previously, I'm cautiously optimistic based on what I've heard that this is a good thing. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, keep in mind, okay, the fundamental difference is we've got the full weight of Turner, the Turner network behind this, and let me tell you how important they're taking it. Okay, I got to meet a chap called Lenny Daniels. He was in the room. He's like the president for Turner Sports, I believe. There's several other, like pretty much it was a who's who of the Turner network that were in this meeting. They did. It wasn't that they sent a newly appointed 24-year-old executive that's a friend of a family person, a stakeholder who's presiding their esports division. These were the real people that have been calling the real shots. Anybody who saw Jason Lake's photos that he tweeted out will see exactly. We got a tour of the full Turner Studios. We went right the way round. They took us into the studio where this will be hosted. It was huge. It was like an airplane hangar. It was absolutely massive, and they're going to build a studio in there. And there's talk of a live studio audience. Grant Hill, the legendary basketball player, dropped in to say hello and was talking about esports with us. So again, you can say maybe all of those things are gimmicks to get us on board, but it shows Turner is serious. You contrast that with CGS. It was funded by the Murdochs. I never met a Murdoch. I never saw a Murdoch. What I did see is the likes of Scott Valencia and the other greedy, money-grasping assholes that kind of propped up that business. And I also saw a lot of, kind of low-level people that clearly didn't really care too much about what happened beyond cutting a nice big fat paycheck for themselves. And the production team that presided over the UK and European branch, at least, was the production team that were behind Robot Wars. Now, that's great. I think Robot Wars is fine TV of an evening, but there's a world of difference. I mean, a world of difference. And don't get me wrong, in 2007, I was blown away. I was sharing a hotel with Chris Kamara, the legendary soccer commentator from Sky Sports, and we got to have a beer and we were hanging out, and it was amazing. It was great. But this is something else. This is the next step in the esports evolution. This is the first time a network station of this stature has doubled down on esports and is throwing these kind of resources into making the definitive esports broadcast. We've never seen anything like this. So I do urge skeptics to kind of just saddle it a little bit because I think they're going to be blown away with what they get. And I'm the guy, I never say that. So if I'm saying that, then people, need to realize that it really is impressive. I'm sure there's a lot of team owners that were in the meeting that would love to get into it and give away more details, but we've got to be very careful here. Nothing is finalized, nothing is agreed. We don't even have dates yet. We have a very promising start to a very promising partnership between esports and network television.
Yeah, it looks, as you said, promising. There's potential here. I do hope when the actual broadcasts come along that we have the players, the athletes, if you will, treated seriously. I remember the CGS days when they were forced to give trash talk spiels, and it was just the most ridiculous thing in the little jerseys and yes, no more CGS memories. I think we've had enough of that for one thing. I will ask you this: is your feeling? I know it's early. That teams are going to be chosen for the league based mostly on merit or mostly on the positioning of the organization and how relevant the organization is? Because that'll become a big question as we get closer to the reality of this happening.
One of the really cool things about the meeting was that when we were all sat there, and yes, the team owners, it was a who's who of Counter-Strike. And just who's who of esports in a lot of ways. But you have to understand that while there's always going to be an elite level of organization that you're obviously going to want to invite to this, Turner made it abundantly clear that this was about distributing the opportunity not just to the old boys club, but as far and wide as was possible for the betterment of CSGO. This obviously does have a lot of lucrative opportunities in terms of sponsorship and returns for the teams that are involved. It'll be highly coveted. My inbox is already blown up. People are asking me, how do I get involved in this? Can our team get involved in this? Teams that realistically would never be invited to a league of this stature are asking if they can get involved. And the thing is, I've seen nothing at the moment that suggests even those people wouldn't be considered. Certainly, if I was making the decisions, they probably would be. But Turner have said they want to make sure we get the right blend because that's important for the ecosystem. But just from a purely selfish point of view, it's important for broadcasting as well. You need to have interesting stories. You need to have teams that are in, at different levels of ability. You need to have that upset potential in the league. You need to have underdogs as well as established giants. And I think they'll do the responsible thing and make sure the invites go to the teams that deserve to be there. And not just the same old people. Certainly, if I remember rightly from the press release, I think it's 16 teams they're looking to bring in. There's going to be room. I mean, there was slots in the meeting that didn't have that they had no teams attached. They were like, we're probably going to reach out to another few teams. And talk to them about it, and we'll welcome any feedback from the group about who those should be. And obviously, I chipped in and made my suggestions because I believed I was like perhaps one of the more neutral parties in the room. But yeah, this is about equality of opportunity. And once a lesser organization gets on television and has a taste of that kind of television revenue and the sponsors that it can get, because when you're obviously compiling a deck, people still want the sexy TV numbers. They still want you to be able to say, "Hey, we're going to be on television." Once they've had a taste of that, it could take a small organization and push them over the top into that tier one level in terms of finance. So I think Turner are really aware of that. I think Valve as well. Valve have always been really cognizant about doing what's best for the kind of esports ecosystem. Sometimes, yes, they might do game balance things that annoy people. Yes, people complain that they don't get enough prize money. But Valve is looking at the CSGO scene, and then they want to make sure it's all balanced. They don't want any one party to be more powerful than anyone else. And this is why they're principally opposed to the idea of exclusivity. Although I don't know if they'd ever go on record and say that, but I think it's quite clear from their actions. So this again. Whatever teams end up going to it, and nothing's been finalized yet. In fact, not even the teams that attended the meeting are guaranteed to even be in the league. That has to be stressed as well. So yeah, I think the teams that get in will be the teams that deserve it. I think we'll all agree on that when it happens.
Yeah, obviously we can't go into any specifics here, but you would say at least that we're not going to be limited to the shadow cabal of LCS premium owners, perhaps.
No, look, I mean, I won't tell a lie either. I'm obviously trying to be diplomatic because I don't want to
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
don't want to I don't want to stymie the opportunity for people, and I don't want to create hysteria in the community that's already kind of maybe had a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. And I think the last thing I would want would be that hysteria that we've seen from esports communities in the past to maybe turn Turner off or to potentially drive Turner away or to make them revise their strategy. I'd hate that. But what I will say is certainly some of the newer owners in esports and some of the LCS owners are there. But I think that makes sense because we need to think about the bigger picture here for esports. Yes, Counter Strike's great, and there were also some of the oldest Counter Strike organizations, involved in these meetings. And I don't know if they've revealed themselves yet, but obviously, when I say the words oldest, you can probably think of the classic Counter Strike organizations. For example, we know Complexity are in there. Jason Lake has gone public about that. Complexity aren't an established LCS team. Complexity aren't an organization that is involved in this kind of new wave. They're old school. They're traditional. They understand the business in ways that few people do. And if you'll notice, they've had a great turn of fortunes lately. They were part of that DraftKings deal, which WME IMG also brokered. They're in a great place right now. And certainly Jason Lake and Jason Bass, their experience is welcome at any table. But eventually, the future of this league for Turner is going to be multi-gaming, I think. I think it's not. I don't think they're just interested in Counter-Strike. I think they're interested in esports as a whole. And that means you need multi-gaming organizations, established multi-gaming organizations, to be involved. So who could deny, say, a Cloud9 a seat at the table when in a relatively short space of time they've gone for having champion winning teams and players in multiple titles? How could you deny TSM? Yes, they're principally a League of Legends team, but they've also got Smash Brothers players, very good Smite team, a great League of Legends team, a great Counter Strike team. These are the organizations that obviously Turner are going to want to work with because as they expand their programming, they're going to have a relationship and a rapport with somebody that can open the door to other teams, other games, other titles, and of course, within an audience context, an established brand that you've seen on other esports programming. So it's, I think, yes, there'll be some of the same old names there, but there's a very good reason for that at this stage.
And you think it's going to be an international mix of teams and players?
Mm. I mean, one of the big talking points that came up was how do we take something global like esports and very regional specific, and then kind of transpose it and put it on American television and it retain that sort of identity and regionality. How will a European team, for example, be received on let's say, for example, a French or a Polish or a Swedish team? How would they be received on American television? How do we keep that regional specificity? How do we keep engagement with the fans high? This was all the type of thing we were really looking long and hard at in the meeting as to what's best to sort of be respectful and reverential to the fans of those organizations and teams. And certainly it's something they're mindful of. I mean, it starts with the small things. Obviously, if you look at any other Turner Sports broadcasting, it's the little things like when they do the bumper, and you're getting into a game, you will see a cutaway panoramic shot of the city that the team is from. And they slowly build into a broadcast. They infuse that regionality. I imagine some of the features that'll be in the ancillary programming. I imagine some of that will involve like on location shooting in Sweden, Poland, France to kind of flesh out the national and cultural identities of the team in the league. So I don't think we're necessarily going to lose anything. I don't think it's going to be like, okay, here's some terrible franchise names. London's got the Mint in it. Mint is cool. Your London Mint, Birmingham Salvo, because maybe they built cannons or something up there once. I don't even know.
Where'd you get
It's
that
not
from,
going to
Richard?
be like that.
You pull that name off the
Yeah,
top
I
of your
don't know.
head? Birmingham Salvo?
Yeah, I just pull this off the top of my head.
Wow.
Like they want the teams to retain their identity, and what they want to do is they want to explain that identity to an audience that maybe wouldn't get it straight away, while simultaneously finding a way so that existing fans of the team can tune in and understand what's going on. So again, to sort of repeat myself a little bit, there is there isn't any sort of facet that they're not really looking at here. They want it to be authentic. They want it to be esports, and they don't want any teams to suffer just because it's an American network. And when I say suffer, I mean suffer from an identity crisis just because it's an American network that's broadcasting them. And yeah, I mean, again, we're in the very early stages, talks wise, but it's all really, really promising stuff so far.
Now, I think some of the skepticism, the knee-jerk reaction is understandable because the CGS memories remain fresh enough to cause these reactions. We should obviously let things play out, and as I mentioned before, and as you've detailed for us now, there is promising word thus far. What we're hearing so far is cautiously optimistic stuff. I do want to ask you, though, some of the skepticism I've seen, some of the more measured skepticism, is about going to cable in the first place. Do we need
Yeah.
to take Counter-Strike or any esports title to cable? Because the future of broadcast would seem pretty clearly to be online streaming, to be online platforms like Twitch and others, perhaps YouTube gaming, who knows. Is it necessary to take a step backwards to cable? What do we gain from doing that?
I don't necessarily see it as a step backwards, and I've talked a lot about how TV is a dying medium. It is, and of course people know that. But though there's certain areas where we're still experiencing growth on TV, sports broadcasting is one of them. Year upon year, that market grows. The global sports market is worth hundreds of billions, and pay-per-view broadcasting and cable broadcasting and everything else that caters to the sports audience continues to increase. There's also some other types of shows which are enjoying marginal year upon year increases, but certainly sports is a big area of growth. Now, Turner have never said, again, at any point in the meeting that they want to make this cable exclusive, that they want to prevent people from watching it. They've got some incredible apps for following sports. They've got some really good online kind of broadcasting facilities and kind of overlays. Like if anyone's seen their NASCAR, the way they do the I don't even know what to call it, but like basically when you go onto the site and you watch NASCAR, you can do all sorts of stuff. You can get feedback from the driver's radio. You can, do NI. You can change cameras around and stuff, and then just statistics and everything else that's going on. It's being fed back in live time, and it's really impressive. And it kind of, when they introduced that to NASCAR, that raised the bar again in terms of that kind of online interactive experience. Now, what they want to do is they want to try and find something that is akin to that for esports, for a Counter-Strike broadcast. So I very much see this as a harmony of online and cable broadcasting. I don't think anyone's going to be necessarily excluded and prevented from watching it. I think they want it to grow. But the good thing about being on television, and this is key to this is why it was a holy grail for esports for so many years. There are people out there that don't know they're esports fans yet. And you will only reach them through television because that's what they watch. They're of that generation, they're of that mindset. That's how they consume their media. The only way we can reach them is by being on TV. And believe me, there'll be a sizable number of people that will watch an esports broadcast and they will get it and it will click and they will stay with it. And maybe they start watching it online, but whatever, we've grown the fan base collectively for esports. Maybe they'll get into other games, who knows where it'll go. But there's a whole generation of people we've not reached on TV yet. And when you consider the numbers that we're getting right now, where if we can have 1.3 million viewers at a Counter-Strike, watching peak for a Counter-Strike event, and yet BT Sports, who are set up to rival the Murdoch-owned Sky Sports, their highest soccer game, Premier League soccer game, was Chelsea versus Tottenham on New Year's Day, and 2014, and they. Well, rather, I should say the turn of the year, and they were only getting 1.7 million for a Premier League soccer game. I mean, you can see how close we are. If we start combining the streaming numbers with some online viewing numbers, we've got a really impressive viewership that I think will sell the sport to even bigger sponsors and other broadcasting companies. I mean, I genuinely believe we are now here. We are at the stage now where you see MTG trying to, they buy three-quarters of ESL. They buy ESEA outright. They're looking to get a controlling interest in DreamHack. They want to broadcast stuff. They want to broadcast esports TV. Other companies are literally looking at esports properties right now. How can we get involved in this? How can we start broadcasting this? Whether people realize this or not, this is the next stage in the esports story.
Yeah, it's certainly promising. I think you look at our Turner's work streaming the NCAA tournament, actually, the college basketball tournament you mentioned. They've done great job with that. They have some good online offerings available in the past. We'll see how they compare to the online services we're used to here in the esports world. I do think there's something to the demographics thing you mentioned. Part of the reason why we have such a young demographic is because you have to be young, really, to be fluent in the platforms on which esports exist.
Yeah.
If you if you don't know what Twitch is and how to use Twitch, how are you going to watch any of this? You're not. You're just not going to do it. So we'll see what happens. I do think there's a lot of potential out there that exists. We'll close on this last subject here, kind of broadening out from Turner specifically and more into this overall landscape of the cable platform. There are other networks, of course, out there who have had discussions with other developers and with Valve about having their games on their channels. We've seen, of course, ESPN had the debut for cable and esports when they put Heroes of the Dorm, the Heroes of the Storm competition on ESPN, kind of as an experimental thing. The International has been, of course, on ESPN's streaming services. I know the ESPN's had discussions with Riot, for example, about the possibility of working there. Not that those ever went anywhere, that they were anything more than just casual discussions, but they've happened, Is your feeling that we're going to see now, not just from Turner, but we're going to see now more companies in esports like a Riot, like a Blizzard, or a Valve in other ways, and more cable companies like an ESPN, for example, or like a Fox, getting their Fox Sports brand involved? Are we going to see more of these mergers happen because of the Turner deal now? Is it kind of the floodgate opening?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, here's what's great about it. Turner kind of came out of left field for this deal, and I think they've surprised a lot of people with just how, aggressive is the wrong word. I guess passionately is the word that they've pursued getting this league together. I mean, everybody involved in this has worked so hard to make it a reality to the point where we can announce it, and it's happened in a very short space of time. Because you got to strike while the iron's hot. Now, we know ESPN are coming. I mean, that's not a surprise, right? They're taking it very seriously. We know that there's other companies out there right now who shall remain nameless, but TV companies that are looking to get involved, looking to buy existing tournament organizers. We know that's happening. So the floodgates are open. On top of that, you've got mainstream businesses dumping millions and millions of dollars just to get a sponsorship deal. Look at the DraftKings deal, right? The DraftKings deal is a multi-million dollar deal across six teams, six orgs. It's not even a title sponsorship. They don't have a team DraftKings. They just want that brand recognition in our space, and they're going to pay top dollar for it. That's where esports is right now.
Yeah,
That's how big we've become. So, literally, right now, the sky is the limit. That's why we have to proceed with a bit of caution. We have to proceed sensibly. And we have to make sure that the right people are there now that the purse strings are being opened. Because all it's going to take is a couple of cowboys to take some money and not deliver what they promise and to act in bad faith. And we're going to get back to the bad old days where you'll quickly see these big people fly away if people kind of kill the golden goose, or rather the goose that laid the golden egg.
you mentioned DraftKings.
I think
Fan base buying
I think,
buying Alpha Draft also just happened. I mean, or FanDuel, excuse me, buying Alpha Draft just happened. I mean, this is a thing that's happening now. It's not the future. It's like it's happening right now today.
Yeah, and there's lots of talks going on. Again, to bring those companies to a wider audience. I mean, put it this way: if I was a betting man, and that's not a pun, that's not a play on words, I would certainly imagine that Riot Games is going to revise its policy about gambling and fantasy website sponsorships in their league very, very soon. I would certainly imagine that's the way they're going to go because that's the big cash investment that's coming in right now. And it won't stop there. There's going to be others. There's going to be other huge companies coming into the space. I mean, in global internet providers, just huge conglomerates. I mean, hell, we're talking about it like it hasn't already happened. We know YouTube, the Google-owned YouTube, are going to go very hard into esports in a big way in 2016. With their revised and streaming platform. Amazon are already here. This is the future, and a lot of people are going to get rich. And as I've always said, I certainly hope that some of those people, if not the majority of those people, are the players.
Yeah, the future, as they say, is now. It has arrived. This is it. The esports future we've been talking about, thinking about for so long, has finally gotten here. It's a matter of how we handle it now that it's here. This is just the first step of many to come over the next year. I think we're going to see things change dramatically. The landscape will shift as it has not since, I don't even know when, perhaps the CGS days, but hopefully it will shift this time for the better. I have hopes anyway. We've come too far, Richard. We've come too far.
Yeah, well, I agree. The one thing I will say is, and this is both a good and a bad thing, we're on an equal footing with the businesses and the networks and the organizations and the venture capitalists that want to get into our space. They now respect our knowledge.
Right.
But the problem with that is there are people out there who will misrepresent. And that could be an ongoing issue. I just think we've got to wield our newfound respect that we've got from the outside industries. I think we need to wield it responsibly. And certainly everybody I've been talking to around the Turner deal understands that this is a watershed moment for esports as a whole. Because as I said, it's not just about Counter-Strike. This is about a major TV network wanting to broadcast all of our games, everything that we do, games that haven't even been invented yet. You know, the ones that work on television, that's what they want to put on there. They want great programming, great broadcasting, and they want to cater to the existing audience and maybe find a new one as well. So I think, yeah, we've definitely got to proceed with caution, but I think we're in a good place. And I definitely believe that this Turner deal will be a resounding success. I think we'll look back in 2-3 years and we'll be like, why were we even apprehensive? That's the way it always had to go.
I look forward personally to the 2017 Rocket League season when it comes on TBS. I think I'm going to be a big fan of myself.
Don't rule Rocket League out, brother.
I'm not. Was I joking, Richard? Are you sure?
No. I'm. Put it this way. I think we can safely say Rocket Stone. Jesus, what's happening to me? Rocket League is more of a spectacle than Hearthstone, is what I was going to say. So I think it's got a real chance of getting involved. in television, maybe at some point. Let's get an infrastructure first. Though. Let's get some regular tournaments. Let's get some good casters and commentators. But then when that's happened, yeah, I think that could be a really successful game.
Yeah, having some tournaments and casters does sound like a good start, I think, before we get it on cable. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that first.
Yeah,
Thanks
yeah,
as always.
baby steps,
Exactly. Necessary steps. Thanks as always again to Richard Lewis, the one, the only, Sir Richard Lewis, I should say. Excuse me. Didn't mean to dishonor the Queen by not including your title. Richard here to talk about Turner bringing Counter-Strike and perhaps esports to some different airwaves. We'll see how that goes. I am optimistic cautiously, just as my friend Richard is here. Stick around. Coming up next, we have our Smash Brothers AMA session. Don't go anywhere for that. And if you missed part of the interview with Richard, of course, YouTube, w.esports, the whole thing will be uploaded there. Again, stick around, follow the channel. Be right back.